Hey guys, Todd Derry here, TD's Fat to Fit. This is my chapter 2 of my video series, Metabolic Dysfunction, Metabolic Disease. I'm going to go into calories in, calories out, law of thermodynamics, also the hormone or obesity model, how that works with the human body, the liver and its function within metabolism, metabolic disease and indications to figure out if you have metabolic disease or insulin resistance, and then diabetes, type 1 and type 2, and the side effects of having type 1 and type 2. Let's get into it. The law of thermodynamics. This is the whole consume less food, work more theory. If you have a closed system in a vacuum and you have amount of work and amount of food, you lower the food, increase work, you have a deficit. That deficit is supposedly fat metabolism, right? If you lower the amount of calories you do, you exercise more, burn so many calories more, well, that deficit in calories will then be compensated by the fat on your body. Sounds good. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. This would work if it were a closed system and unvariable, meaning no hormones and such. But our body fights this progression along the whole way. If you lower your caloric intake, your BMR goes down, your thyroid goes down, thyroxine, T3. Ghrelin, your hunger hormone, goes up. And other things like cortisol fight you. Cortisol increases, adrenaline increases. These are fat obesity hormones. And so again, there are things that are applied in a simple engine, in a vacuum, this would work. But last time I checked, our human body is not in a vacuum and it's not a simple system. So what happens? Your body, as they say, you're fat because you're lazy model. You don't burn as much as you consume, and it's simple science, which you cannot debate. This is the law of thermodynamics. Burn more than you eat and you will lose fat. This is repeated over and over through gurus and doctors and specialists. How are they wrong? Why are they wrong? They aren't totally wrong. I mean, the system does work initially. Sure, you lose 5, 10 pounds, and then you get tired, and then you get hangry, and then you get pissed, and you get more tired, and then you get more angry, and you get more pissed, and sooner or later something gives. And you either give up or you stop working out or both. And typically you rebound and then gain all the weight back. There's been so many starvation studies that have happened in the turn of the century that they could never repeat in today's world because of ethics, proved that none of these starvation diets work. And your body fights you the entire way. Changing your BMR, you lower the caloric intake, your blinking slows, your heart rate slows, your walking slows, your thinking slows. I know this from my bodybuilding diets. When I'm really restricting my calories to get 3% body fat, I can't think straight. I mean, I'll go to the store and I'll be just driving down the road and then thinking, oh yeah, I got to go to the store and turn around, drive back right past the store again. Your whole system changes, and it's all about starving yourself and then your body fighting you to self-preserve. It's trying to fight for your life. You programmed your DNA and your hormones to store fat over so many years, and now all of a sudden you're going to starve yourself, which is going to throw off your hormones even more. What's going to give? You're not going to win. So you rebound and then gain that weight back. The next is the hormone model. This, in my case, on the left side, is me fat, very fat. I was eating less and working out like an animal. I couldn't get to the gym long enough. I couldn't do enough cardio. Ridiculous. As I said before, I do cardio before, work out for an hour and a half, and then do cardio after. But I wasn't eating right. I was eating carbs, as clean as they were. But again, I was having an insulin response, which wasn't allowing me to burn fat. And then I figured things out, changed some things. And on the right is me, very lean, and I was eating a ton more food, totally satiated, wasn't hungry, working out less purposely. And look at the condition I was in, losing 120 pounds. And in the hormone model, food is two different factors: energy and structural repair. Food is information, and it has a hormone signal. So when you eat a certain type of food, The primary hormone that comes in is insulin. And insulin has two roles in the blood. It either is present and stops glycogen storage and fat lipolysis, or if it's not present in the blood, it inhibits glycogen storage and fat lipolysis. So think of it as gatekeeper. If the gatekeeper is there, insulin, all it's trying to do is push into the cell, not take out. Well, when we're trying to lose fat, what we want to do, take it out of the cell, right? Fat. We want out. Insulin's present, it's only going in. Insulin is in. Insulin is a storage hormone which transports sugar and protein throughout the body for repair and energy transport. Sugar is a toxin, again, at high levels, so its primary function is to reduce glucose by depositing it into the liver or muscle as glycogen. But there's a negative feedback loop. If your glycogen storage is full, it stops that. It won't let more in. And then the insulin resistance starts to take place. The mitochondria starts to dysfunction. And that insulin resistance then starts to increase and sends the glucose back to the liver. The liver's very smart, thinks, okay, we can't store it in glycogen. The liver is full. It creates LPL, a lipoprotein lipase enzyme, takes that glucose, turns it into a triglyceride, and stores it into fat. There is the vicious cycle. The more carbohydrates you eat, the worse that process gets. Glycogen storage is a finite system. It will not continue forever. This is why I always say larger muscles, more muscles give you more storage for glycogen. The more storage you have, the more places you can put glucose. It must be consumed by the liver or muscle, or it's going to get sent back to the liver, and LPL will come in and turn it into fat. So it works in basically a concentration perspective. If the concentration of glucose and glycogen is too high in the cell, it pushes it back to the liver. If it's lowered by activity, exercise, and other things that are creating an energy demand, then it has a place to go. However, in most of the situations out there, we are so over-consuming carbohydrates, there's just no chance the system can win. And it starts to have insulin resistance, and constantly, the more you push insulin in, the more carbohydrates come in, the more that liver has to create lipoprotein lipase and creates more fat. That constant fat deposition is called de novo lipogenesis, the new creation of fat cells and fat proliferation in the belly and throughout the body. And that's why you see this epidemic of obesity, because all we're eating is carbohydrates. What did they tell us in the 80s and 90s? Eat carbohydrates. The food pyramid, and the base of it was grains. Grains and wheat. Eat them all day long. And we got fat and fatter and fatter and unhealthy and inflamed. So again, de novo lipogenesis, the creation of new fat, proliferation throughout the body, and that's what is causing obesity. Remember, sugar glucose is a carbohydrate derived from monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. They're all the same. The more you consume carbs, the more your body signals for this process to happen, and that insulin is the mechanism of storage. So if insulin is present, that glucose is going to get stored, either glycogen, and in most people's case, fat. If insulin continues after insulin resistance, you typically will get NAFLD, which is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Same thing as alcoholic fatty liver disease. The body stops metabolizing glycogen. If alcohol is present, the body stops metabolizing glycogen. Why? To get rid of the alcohol out of the system. And then it deposits everything into the liver as fat. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is the same thing. Too many carbohydrates, and it starts to develop fat nodules in the body. In the liver, I should say. And this is a picture of it. Right side is a healthy red liver, pink, whatever color. And on the other side is the fatty, noduled, disgusting looking liver that is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The liver senses glucose in the body after we've eaten carbohydrates. It signals to the pancreas, the beta cells of the pancreas, to create insulin. to take the glucose out of the cell and push it into the mitochondria. And in most cases, that's full, and it goes back as LPL enzyme and stored as fat. And now we are seeing an epidemic of adults with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Half our population has NAFLD. And then that's also equating into type 2 diabetes and obesity in our children too. Hormones are 100% responsible for all of this process. Without insulin, none of this would take place. We can either utilize the energy and burn it or store it, but if it is not burned or stored as glycogen, it's going to be stored as fat. As this system breaks down and becomes less resistant or accepting of insulin, insulin resistance increases and metabolic disease is then taking over. So what is metabolic disease? Metabolic disease, there's many different ways to look at metabolic disease. Typically, it's abdominal obesity, fat deposition throughout the body, insulin resistance, high triglycerides compared to cholesterol levels, hypertension or high blood pressure, high fasting blood sugar over 120 fasting, skin tags, which is called aconcordon or acrocordon, those bumps or skin tags that are on people's necks and stuff. That is insulin resistance. That is cell growth proliferated from excess insulin, excess energy. It's turning into tissue or soft tissue that the body is just putting everywhere. They actually fall off. When you get back in health, they actually dry up and fall off. Something else called skin discoloration or acanthosis nigricans. That's the darkening of the skin around the neck and typically in the armpit area. It's just dark. Sometimes it's down on the calf too, or ankle. And that is a symptom of insulin resistance, metabolic disease. The red bumps on your forearms and also on your shoulder. I used to have this little red bumps. They're not quite zits, but they're just bumpy skin. It makes your skin feel rough, and they're little tiny red bumps. That's keratosis pylorus. That is a toxin coming out from sugar metabolism. Also a indication and a result of sugar metabolism. Autoimmune diseases, you name it. If it's an autoimmune disease like Crohn's, colitis, IBD, Hashimoto's, thyroid, psoriasis, you name it. Those are all typically result from inflammation from too many carbohydrates. Fingernail ridges. Feel your fingernails and they got real nasty ridges, real high ridges. That is insulin resistance. Also, eyebrow thinning. The outer 1/3 of your eyebrows, if they're thin, that is adrenal fatigue and cortisol from high inflammation in the body, again, from carbohydrates. Hormones are responsible for obesity. They've proven this time and time again, and that is from insulin, cortisol, and estrogen. High insulin or high cortisol directly leads to obesity. Fat is now recognized in the endocrine system as an organ, creating primarily estrogen. Fat releases an aromatase enzyme, which turns testosterone into estrogen. So the more fat you have, the more estrogen you have. And that's why you see so many guys with female characteristics. The dad bod, the gynecomastia, the female breast tissue in a man from too many carbohydrates, too much insulin. That is all based on large amounts of adipose tissue, large amounts of fat, creating an aromatase enzyme, and that can raise in estrogen or estradiol over 200%. This can also change your thyroid levels, ghrelin and leptin, adrenaline. All of these have different configurations and results of higher fat deposition in the body. It changes hunger and satiety and expenditure of calories throughout the day. So when the pancreas can't keep up anymore, insulin resistance is so high, your pancreas is on overtime trying to create enough insulin to get the glucose out of the bloodstream. It finally gives up. It either gives up or the system is so resistant that it just doesn't work anymore. And then you start to see elevated glucose levels. That's type 2 diabetes. Now typically at that level, you start to take exogenous insulin, right? Type 2 diabetic, they have to now take insulin to say initially save their life, which obviously in the interim is the right thing to do. But for them to say, here's your insulin pen, keep doing what you're doing, it's a death sentence. because it increases all-cause mortality, increases obesity, additional mental health issues. We haven't even talked about mental health issues when it comes to metabolic disease. Nerve damage, increased risk of Alzheimer's, which is also now being considered and known as type 3 diabetes. It's a progressive disease, and it doesn't stop at type 2. It stops at dementia and death. Increased risk of heart disease and stroke, skin ulcers and wound care issues. Giving insulin for a long strategic period to a type 2 diabetic is kind of like giving an EpiPen to a peanut allergy or a person with a peanut allergy. Here's your EpiPen. Keep eating those peanuts. That's insanity. Why would you do that? How about reducing your carbohydrates and your inflammatory foods? Get your insulin to be more sensitive and at the very least, really reduce your need for exogenous insulin. And over a period of time, you probably get off insulin 100% and cure your type 2 diabetes, which supposedly is incurable in the medical literature. Something else that happens with type 2 diabetics is called insulin injection lipohypertrophy. And this is fat deposition in the area of the insulin injection. And it looks like this. There was a study in 2001 that revealed insulin intake equated and was causational to higher fat deposition. And they had type 2 diabetics that hadn't taken insulin yet. However, they put them on a caloric reduction diet. So they took calories away, but they added insulin. And they all gained weight. So caloric deficit. However, they just added insulin, and in 6 months, they all gained 10 pounds. The whole group. Shocker. Check this out. Type 1 diabetes. How does insulin affect type 1 diabetics? Obviously life-saving, because typically type 1 diabetes is onset around 4 to 7 years old, and then there's another progression from like 10 to 14 years, I think. Insulin was first synthesized and isolated in 1921 by a few researchers, and this is life-saving. Obviously, for a type 1 diabetic, it was lethal. But look at the difference in 1 year with insulin therapy for this one patient. It's incredible. Well, what's the main difference? Fat. She looks healthy. However, in today's world, this pursuit of the perfect body, type 1 diabetics, against all recommendation and potential lethal decisions, there's something called diabulimia, which is the reduction of insulin intake by a type 1 diabetic, which could kill you, to lose weight. Again, kind of promoting the fact that insulin causes fat deposition. Please like, subscribe, comment below, ask any questions. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. My name is Todd Derry. This is TD's Fat to Fit. I'll talk to you soon.